Right now, in garages across Germany and the United States, a handful of collectors are making moves nobody else is talking about. They are not chasing the cars every car channel tells you to buy. They are quietly buying the ones everyone else forgot. One of these cars was dismissed for decades as a slow seller. Today it trades for more than a house. Another was hand-built in secret by Porsche's own engineers, disguised to look like nothing special, and just sold for over $350,000. A third isn't even a sports car on paper. It's a station wagon, and it could still out-accelerate the exotics of its era. These aren't the cars that get magazine covers. They don't have the mystique of a 911 or the name recognition of a Ferrari. That's exactly why the sharpest buyers in the collector world are moving on them first, before the rest of the market wakes up. By the end of this video, you'll understand why a comedian's barely driven Mercedes sedan just outsold cars 10 times its badge value, and why a car nicknamed after a bird now sells for more than a McLaren. Somewhere today, somebody is letting one of these cars go. They have no idea what it's about to be worth. The car that was supposed to prove Volkswagen could build a real sports coupe almost buried that idea forever. When Volkswagen sat down to design the Corrado, they weren't looking at their own lineup for inspiration. Designer Herbert Schaefer had the Porsche 944 in his sightline. Built by the coach builders at Carmen, the Corrado wasn't a dressed-up Golf. It rode on a stiffer, more advanced platform, with sharper handling than anything else wearing a VW badge. Then the price tag hit showrooms, and the trouble started. A Corrado SLC cost over $22,000 in 1992, thousands more than a Golf GTI. Buyers weren't ready to pay Porsche-adjacent money for a car with a Volkswagen logo on the hood. Sales stalled. Production ended in 1995, and for the next 2 decades, the Corrado quietly disappeared from the conversation entirely. Here's what most people missed while they ignored it. The Corrado was the first production car in the world with an automatic rear spoiler, one that deployed on its own once you crossed highway speed. And under the hood of the later cars sat something genuinely strange, a narrow-angle 6-cylinder engine, tilted at just 15 degrees, sharing a single-cylinder head. It was a packaging trick nobody else had pulled off. Of the roughly 97,000 Corrados Volkswagen built, only a fraction ever received that VR6 engine. And because almost nobody believed a VW coupe could be worth collecting, plenty of owners in the 2000s let them go for a few $1,000s, some for less than the cost of a used Golf. Those cars are gone now, and the people who sold them can't buy that mistake back. The market has started correcting itself. Hagerty flagged the Corrado VR6 on its bull market list back in 2020, and values have climbed steadily since, averaging around $16,000 to $25,000 today, with the rare UK-only Storm Edition pushing toward $50,000. It's still one of the cheapest ways to own a piece of hidden Porsche-adjacent engineering. And that narrow-angle engine didn't disappear with the Corrado. Volkswagen kept refining the idea for the next 3 decades, through the W8, the W12, and eventually the 16-cylinder heart of the Bugatti Veyron. The same concept that once sat inside a car nobody wanted now powers one of the fastest production cars ever built. For 34 years, one of the most quietly significant cars in Porsche's history sat almost untouched in a Los Angeles garage, and its owner barely drove it enough to notice what he had. That owner was Jerry Seinfeld, a man famous for his obsession with 911s, 550 Spyders, and a Carrera GT. But the car that made headlines wasn't a Porsche at all. It was a Mercedes-Benz sedan. On the surface, the 500e looks like any other early -90 SE class, the kind of car nobody would glance at twice in a parking lot. That's exactly the point. In 1990, Mercedes wanted a high-performance flagship to answer BMW's M5. The problem was, their own factories were buried in S-Class production and had no room to build it. So Mercedes did something almost nobody knew about at the time. They handed the job to Porsche. Inside a Zuffenhausen building known as Rossel, the same complex where advanced Porsche sports cars are assembled today, engineers widened the E-Class body, dropped in a 5.0-liter V8 borrowed from the SL class, and rebuilt the suspension to handle it. Every single 500e demanded 18 days of hand assembly, shuttled back and forth between 2 factories before it ever reached a showroom. No other production sedan on the road got that kind of treatment. The result earned a nickname that stuck: the wolf in sheep's clothing. For most of its life, The 500e traded quietly in the $47,000 to $80,000 range, respected by enthusiasts, ignored by everyone else. Then, in March of 2026, Seinfeld's own 1992 example crossed the block at the Amelia Island auction. With just 2,335 miles on the odometer after more than 3 decades of ownership, it sold for $357,000. That number wasn't just about celebrity provenance. It was proof that the market is finally catching up to what this car actually is. Preserve one of these long enough, and you're not sitting on a used Mercedes. You're sitting on a piece of Porsche's own engineering history, hiding behind a badge nobody suspects. And the 500e wasn't the only secret to come out of that Zuffenhausen building. Around the same years, Porsche was quietly finishing off a second German sedan project. Except this one wasn't a sedan at all. It was a station wagon, and it could keep pace with actual sports cars. Picture pulling up to a stoplight next to a 911, 2 ski boxes strapped to your roof, a trunk full of grocery bags, and beating it off the line. That's not a fantasy. That's exactly what the Audi RS2 Avant was built to do, and it's the reason serious collectors treat this station wagon with more respect than most actual sports cars from the same decade. In the early 1990s, Audi was still recovering from a damaging string of unintended acceleration claims that had wrecked its reputation in the US. The company needed something to prove it could still build a genuinely fast car. So Audi did something unusual. They partnered with Porsche. Audi 80 wagon bodies were shipped from Ingolstadt to the same Zuffenhausen facility where Porsche had just finished building the Mercedes 500e. Porsche engineers tore into the car completely. A bigger turbo running significantly more boost, high-lift camshafts, an upgraded intercooler, a reworked 6-speed gearbox. They even borrowed real Porsche hardware, 911 fuel pumps, 911 door mirrors, and brakes lifted straight from the 968 Club Sport. The result was 315 horsepower in a family wagon, capable of sprinting to 60 miles per hour in about 5.4 seconds. In 1994, that made it faster than most sports cars people were actually buying that year. Here's the part that makes it rare instead of just quick. Audi built the RS2 for barely more than a year, March 1994 to July 1995, and stopped at just 2,891 examples worldwide. It was Audi's very first RS model, the car that started an entire performance lineage, and there will never be another one made. Which one would you rather own? A station wagon that can humiliate a 911 or the 911 itself? Drop your answer in the comments, because collectors are genuinely split on this. Demand has outpaced supply for years. Values that once sat under $40,000 have pushed past $100,000 for the cleanest, lowest mileage examples, and pricing has been climbing steadily rather than spiking and correcting, the kind of pattern collectors trust. Owning an RS2 means owning the punchline to an entire decade of Porsche owners who never saw it coming. It looks like the most boring car in the parking lot. It's anything but. And Porsche's fingerprints don't stop at wagons and sedans. Their next collaboration went straight to the top of BMW's own lineup, a car so overbuilt for its time that the market spent 20 years unsure what to make of it. For most of its life, BMW's most ambitious car of the 1990s was treated like a mistake nobody wanted to admit to making. When the 8 Series launched in 1989, it was BMW's statement to the world, a wide, low Grand Tourer wrapped around a 5.0-liter V12, built to say everything the 7 Series couldn't. But the market didn't know what to do with it. It was too expensive to run casually, not rare enough to feel exclusive, and it arrived at the exact moment BMW enthusiasts were falling in love with something smaller and sharper, the E30 M3. The 8 Series got stuck in the middle, and it stayed there for almost 30 years. The version that mattered most almost slipped through entirely unnoticed. The 850 CSI wasn't just a bigger engine bolted into the standard car. BMW's M division took the V12, bumped it to 5.6 liters, and hand-tuned it individually before it ever left the factory. Haggerty has since called it beautifully proportioned and massively over-engineered, 12 cylinders of German ambition that collectors spent decades walking past without a second look. That's where the regret sets in. For years, the maintenance costs alone scared off casual buyers, timing belts, cooling systems, and electronics that punished neglect. So the people who could have bought a hand-built N-Division V12 flagship for the price of a used sedan simply didn't. Value sat flat for so long that owning one felt more like a burden than an investment. That's changing fast. The average manual 850i now trades at roughly $33,606, but the ceiling has cracked wide open. One automatic example sold for $177,500 in January of 2026 alone. The true CSI, the M-built version, now carries a benchmark value north of $92,000, and Haggerty has confirmed good condition examples climbing as collectors finally recognize what they've been overlooking for 3 decades. The gap between what these cars cost a decade ago and what the best examples are pulling today is exactly where the opportunity lives, right before the rest of the market notices. BMW wasn't the only German brand chasing a flagship gamble that took decades to pay off. Porsche made an even bigger bet, one that almost cost the 911 its future entirely. There was a moment in Porsche's history when the company's own executives decided the 911 was finished and built its replacement. That's not an exaggeration. Through the 1970s, Porsche leadership genuinely believed the rear-engine 911 was an outdated design that had reached the end of its road. Their answer was the 928, a front-engined, water-cooled V8 Grand Tourer, engineered to be everything the 911 wasn't. It was smoother, more advanced, and packed with technology far ahead of its time. Weissach rear-axle steering, aerodynamics tuned in a wind tunnel, a cabin built for comfort instead of raw feedback. It even won European Car of the Year, a trophy the 911 never touched. And then the 911 simply refused to die. Enthusiasts stayed loyal to it, sales held strong, and Porsche quietly shelved the plan to replace their icon. The 928 kept being built anyway, for 18 years, always living in the shadow of the car it was supposed to retire. The final and best version arrived almost as an afterthought. The 928 GTS, built only from 1992 to 1995, got a 5.4-liter V8 pushing 345 horsepower, wider rear fenders, and serious brake upgrades. Fewer than 500 manual examples were ever built for the entire world, genuinely rarer than most 911s from the same era. For decades, that rarity didn't matter to the market. The 928 was dismissed as the car Porsche got wrong, and values reflected it. The cheapest way into a V8 Porsche for anyone willing to overlook the badge snobbery. Now that's reversing hard. Manual GTS examples are already commanding 6 figures for exceptional cars, and one 1995 GTS sold at RM Sotheby's for $406,500, more than $130,000 above its pre-sale estimate. Stuck Cars now calls it the safest long-term value play in the entire 928 lineup. There's a real irony sitting at the center of this story. The car Porsche built to end the 911 is now being chased by the same collectors who spent decades worshipping the 911 instead. The failed successor is finally becoming exactly what it was designed to be, a legend in its own right, just 30 years later than planned. Porsche wasn't the only manufacturer building a car with a hidden agenda. Mercedes had one too, except theirs wasn't designed to replace anything. It was built purely to win, disguised as an ordinary sedan you'd never look at twice. In the late 1980s, BMW had a problem sitting in Mercedes' way, and its name was the M3. BMW's touring car racer was dominating the DTM series, and Mercedes needed a weapon that could beat it, not on a showroom floor, but on a racetrack. Racing rules demanded that manufacturers actually sell a road-going version of whatever they raced, in real numbers, to real customers. So Mercedes built one. They just made sure almost nobody could actually have it. The result was the 190e February 5th, 16 Evolution 2, and it looked nothing like a Mercedes was supposed to look. Box flares stretched over the wheel arches. A towering rear wing sat over the trunk. Under the skin, Mercedes fitted a hydropneumatic suspension system that could be raised and lowered by hand. A detail lifted straight for motorsport, not luxury sedans. The engine, a 2.5-liter inline-4 tuned by AMG, pushed 232 horsepower through a chassis built to survive a full DTM season, not a daily commute. Mercedes built exactly 502 of them, just enough to satisfy the rulebook and not one more. Which one would you have actually picked back in 1990? BMW's E30 M3, or Mercedes Evolution 2. The DTM grid spent years fighting that exact argument, and honestly, the market still hasn't fully settled it. Let us know which side you're on. For years, the Evo 2 lived as a footnote, a strange, winged oddity most people outside serious Mercedes circles had never heard of. That's no longer true. Classic.com now puts the average sale price around $280,000. The record stands at $544,000. What was once a rulebook loophole is now recognized as one of the defining homologation specials of its era, sitting alongside the most sought-after post-war Mercedes ever built. Here's what makes this one different from every car on this list so far. The Evo 2 wasn't built to be comfortable, practical, or even particularly likable. It was built purely to win, and it did, which is exactly why collectors treat it like a piece of motorsport history that happens to have 4 doors. But even a $500,000 homologation special looks almost reasonable next to what's coming next. The final car on this list didn't just get expensive. It became one of the fastest appreciating collector cars in the entire hobby, and the story of what it used to cost will make you sick. In 1987, at a test track in Nardo, Italy, a small German tuning company humiliated Ferrari in front of the entire automotive world. Road and Track had gathered the fastest production cars on the planet for a top-speed showdown. Ferrari's F40 was the car everyone expected to win, and it hit 201 miles per hour. Then a modified Porsche 911 from a company most Americans had never heard of came around the banked oval and blew past it, 211 miles per hour, faster than anything else on that track. The car was painted a shade of yellow so specific it earned its own name, Blütengelb, or Blossom Yellow. Journalists started calling it the Yellowbird, and the nickname never left. The company behind it wasn't Porsche at all. It was Ruf, founded in 1939 as a service station in the small Bavarian town of Pfaffenhausen, later turned into a full manufacturer by Alois Ruf Jr. The CTR wasn't a modified 911 in the way most tuners modify cars. Ruf built it with a twin-turbo 3.4-liter flat-six, a 6-speed gearbox engineered entirely in-house, and in its rarest form, aluminum body panels and a factory roll cage to shed weight. Only 29 were ever built. Just 9 wore the yellow that made it famous. For most of its life, the market badly underpriced what this car actually was. As recently as 2018, a black Yellowbird sold at auction for $1,022,500. Real money, but modest next to what was coming. Anyone who could have bought one in the 2000s or early 2010s, when they traded for a fraction of that, had the chance to own one of the rarest, fastest analog cars Germany ever produced. Most people passed. Then, in 2025, everything changed at once. One Yellowbird sold for $6,055,000 at Gooding & Company's Amelia Island auction, the highest price ever paid for a Ruf, and enough to make it Haggerty's official sale of the year. Weeks later, a second one sold for $4.68 million. In under a decade, values had multiplied nearly 6 times over. That's the real lesson sitting underneath every car on this list. The Yellowbird was never a secret because it wasn't good enough. It was a secret because almost nobody was paying attention yet. By the time everybody notices, the price has already moved on without them. 7 cars. 7 completely different stories, and one thread running through every single one of them. A forgotten Volkswagen whose engine secretly powers a Bugatti. A Mercedes sedan hand-built by Porsche in disguise. A station wagon that could embarrass a 911. A BMW flagship the market ignored for 30 years. The Porsche built to replace another Porsche. A homologation special born purely to win a war on the racetrack. And a nicknamed bird that turned a 6-figure car into a 7-figure one in under a decade. None of these were secrets because they weren't good enough. They were secrets because almost nobody was paying attention yet. By the time the rest of the market catches on, the price has already moved past the people who hesitated. That's the pattern worth remembering. The next future classic isn't hiding in a museum or a magazine cover. It's probably sitting in an ordinary driveway right now, looking like nothing special, waiting for someone to notice. So tell me, which of these 7 would you buy today if you had to pick just one? And more importantly, what German sleeper do you think we missed? Because there are more of these hiding in plain sight, and the next video is going to find them.